My name is Dennis Calloway, and I have spent 73 years trying to be a man worth knowing. I was born in a farmhouse outside of Dyersburg, Tennessee, in the spring of 1951, the second of 4 boys raised by a father who worked wood with his hands and a mother who stretched every dollar so far it nearly disappeared. We didn't have much, but we had a table to eat at and a roof that held, and my father said that was enough, and he believed it, and eventually I did too. I joined the Army at 18, came back at 21 with a bad knee and a seriousness I hadn't carried when I left, married Carrie Hutchins in the fall of 1976 in a small Methodist church outside of Jackson, and spent the next 4 decades building a furniture business from a 1-car garage into a 30-employee operation that put 3 children through college and paid off a house on Clover Ridge Road that I still consider the finest thing my hands ever made. Not because of the lumber or the nails, but because of what happened inside it. Birthdays, Christmases, the particular noise of a house full of children who don't know yet how fast it all goes. Carrie died 11 years ago. Breast cancer, diagnosed in February, gone by October. 8 months from the word malignant to the day I stood in the rain at Shiloh Memorial Cemetery and watched them lower the only person who had ever fully known me into the Tennessee ground. After that, the house got quiet in a way I never entirely adjusted to. I kept things clean. I maintained the garden she had planted. I attended church on Sundays and men's Bible study on Wednesday mornings, not because I needed to perform my faith, but because those hours of honest, unhurried conversation with other men who were also trying to figure out how to keep going were the closest thing I had found to peace since I lost her. I have 3 children. Travis is 47. He is my oldest and in many ways my most capable. Quick thinking, financially sharp, the kind of man who walks into a room and immediately begins calculating its angles. He inherited my business instincts, but not, I came to understand, my sense of where those instincts have to stop. His marriage to Kristen ended 6 years ago in a divorce I was never given the full story of, and since then he has lived alone in a condominium in Nashville, working in real estate, calling me on my birthday, and at Christmas with the careful warmth of a man fulfilling an obligation. Brandy is 44. She is the middle child and the most like her mother in the ways that matter most: patient, observant, capable of sitting with a hard truth longer than most people can. She married a man named Sean Mercer 20 years ago, and the marriage was always complicated in ways she minimized and I tried to respect. They have 2 daughters, Kayla and Alyssa, who are the loudest sources of joy remaining in my life. I adore those girls. Cody is 39. The youngest, the one who used to fall asleep on my chest when he was 3 years old, the one who cried when we had to put the dog down, the one who called me from his college dorm to ask for advice about a girl he liked. I thought I knew Cody the way you know the weather in a place you've lived your whole life. Not perfectly, but well enough that surprises feel manageable. I was wrong about that. The phone call came at Gate B14 in Memphis International Airport on a Tuesday morning in early July. I was 62 minutes from boarding a flight to Phoenix, Arizona. My old Army buddy Raymond Kowalski, we'd served together at Fort Campbell in 1971 and maintained the kind of friendship that can survive decades of distance because it was built on something real, had called me 3 weeks earlier in a state I had never heard from him before. His wife Margaret had died in May, unexpectedly, a heart attack at 68, and he was drowning in the practical aftermath of loss. Property in 3 counties, a storage unit full of 40 years of accumulated life, probate attorneys who spoke to him in language he couldn't parse. He had no children, no siblings still living. He said, "Dennis, I don't know who else to call." And that was enough. It has always been enough with me. I had packed 2 large bags, arranged for my mail to be held, and told my children I would be gone for approximately 2 months. Travis had said, "Sure, Dad, sounds good." Brandy had said, "Call me when you land." Cody had said, "Tell Raymond I said hello." I was standing at the gate, boarding pass in hand, watching a young mother negotiate a stroller through the crowd when my phone rang. The number was local, a 731 area code, Western Tennessee, but I didn't recognize it. I almost let it go to voicemail. I answered on the 4th ring. The voice was a woman's, older, slightly breathless, like someone who had hurried to make this call. I recognized her after a moment. Misty Greer, who lived 3 houses down on Clover Ridge Road, a retired school teacher I had always been friendly with but never close to. "Dennis." "Good, I caught you. Listen, your children are at your house right now. Travis and the other one, the younger boy. They've been there since yesterday with a truck. I don't know what they're doing, but I thought you should know before you..." The gate agent announced final boarding for my flight. "Misty," I said, "I appreciate you calling, but my kids are adults. Whatever they're doing, I trust them." A pause. Then, "Dennis." It was a big truck, with 2 other men I didn't recognize. Final boarding call. My name on a flight that Raymond was counting on me to be on. "I'll check in with them when I land," I said. "Thank you, Misty." I ended the call. I turned my phone to airplane mode. I walked down the jetway. I have thought about that moment 10,000 times since then. The specific texture of the carpet under my feet, the way the morning light came through the terminal windows, the ease with which I made a decision I cannot unmake. I tell myself I had no real reason to turn back. I tell myself any reasonable person would have done the same. Both of those things are probably true, and neither of them helps. 2 months is a long time to be away from a house you've lived in for 40 years. Raymond and I worked every day, long days, the kind of physical and emotional labor that leaves a man too tired for much reflection. We drove out to Margaret's Scottsdale property 4 times. We sat with attorneys twice a week for the first month. We sorted through her belongings with the excruciating care that the dead deserve, deciding what to give away, what to keep, what had value, and what only felt like it did. In the evenings, Raymond and I ate simple food, drank coffee on his back porch, and talked the way men do when they're old enough to be honest and tired enough to have stopped performing. I called my children periodically. Travis never answered and texted back briefly. Brandy called me every Sunday, always asking how Raymond was doing, always sounding slightly guarded in a way I noted and didn't pursue. Cody called twice in 2 months. Both times he was vague and overly cheerful in the way people are when they are actively not telling you something. I noticed these things, I filed them under "I'll ask when I get home" and kept working. I flew back to Memphis on a Wednesday in early September. The flight was smooth and long. I drank 2 cups of coffee and read a paperback novel I'd bought in the Phoenix airport and watched the landscape change below me as we moved east. The desert giving way to plains, giving way to the green, folded topography of Tennessee, which from above looks like something alive, like the land itself is breathing. I rented a car. I didn't call ahead. The drive to Clover Ridge Road takes 40 minutes from Memphis International on the old highway. The route I have driven so many times I could do it without thinking, which is mostly how I did it, past the grain silos that mark the edge of Tipton County, past the White Baptist Church with the steeple that's been listing to the left for as long as I can remember, past Holly Tanner's roadside stand where she sells tomatoes and local honey from a folding table under a green canopy from May through October. Her stand was closed, the season nearly done. Holly herself was out front stacking empty crates, and she looked up as I passed and raised her hand in a wave, and I waved back, and I thought, I'm almost home. I turned onto Clover Ridge Road at 3:17 in the afternoon. My truck was gone. A 2009 Ford F-150, dark blue, maintained with the kind of devotion that is really just respect for work. That truck was not in the driveway where I had left it. The gravel where it always sat was bare and undisturbed, as though no vehicle had ever occupied that space. I sat in the rental car looking at that patch of gravel for a full 30 seconds before I got out. The front door was unlocked. I stepped into my house and the wrongness of it hit me before my eyes could identify a single specific thing. It was in the air. A vacancy, a lightness, the particular silence of a space that has been relieved of its contents. Then my eyes caught up. The oak sideboard my father built in 1961, the piece I had looked at every single day of my adult life, that had stood against the living room wall through every Christmas, every argument, every ordinary Tuesday of 40 years of marriage, was gone. The upholstered armchairs were gone. The framed photographs that lined the hallway, 40 years of faces, had been removed from the walls, leaving pale rectangular patches on the paint like outlines at a crime scene. I walked through every room. The guest bedroom was stripped to the bare mattress. The dining room, the cherry table I built myself in the winter of 1987, 8 chairs, the finest piece of furniture I ever made, was gone. Not just the table. The chairs, the sideboard, the cabinet where Carrie kept her good dishes. In my bedroom, the cedar chest at the foot of the bed where I kept Carrie's jewelry, the pieces I had never been able to give away, the diamond earrings from our 20th anniversary, her mother's pearl necklace, a gold bracelet she wore every day for the last 15 years of her life. The cedar chest was open and empty. I stood in the bedroom doorway. I had survived a lot of things. I had survived the army and cancer and grief and the slow, grinding work of building something from nothing and watching it outlast the person you built it for. But I had never in 73 years felt what I felt standing in that doorway looking at an empty cedar chest. Not anger, not yet, but something underneath anger, something foundational giving way, like discovering that the floor you have been walking on your whole life is not solid ground. In the kitchen, on the farm table that survived only because it was too heavy and too plain, there was a manila envelope. Inside it were documents. A bill of sale for the truck, signed by Travis, dated July 14th, 3 days after I boarded the flight, made out to a private buyer for $11,000. A consignment receipt from Whitfield Auction House in Nashville listing 41 items of furniture and household goods, estimated sale value between $30,000 and $45,000. A receipt from a jewelry resale shop in Memphis, Premier Estate Buyers, dated July 22nd, listing several pieces of fine jewelry, sold for a combined total of $8,400, and a handwritten note from Travis, written on the back of an envelope, 6 lines. Dad. The items were liquidated to cover family financial obligations we've been dealing with since Mom passed. The house is yours. We didn't touch the property itself. Everything was discussed and agreed upon. Call me when you're back and we'll sit down and go over it together. This was not done lightly. I read that note 4 times. Discussed and agreed upon. By whom? Certainly not by me. This was my house, my furniture, my dead wife's jewelry, my father's hand-built sideboard, not a family asset to be liquidated for obligations I had never been told about. The audacity of that language, the bureaucratic calm of the word liquidated, the almost corporate tidiness of not done lightly, was so complete, so self-assured, that for a moment I could not locate my own response to it. I drove to the county assessor's office the following morning and sat across from a clerk named Victor Delgado, who pulled up the property records with the neutral efficiency of a man who has delivered bad news before. 2 months before I left for Phoenix, Travis had filed a petition to be added as a co-owner of the Clover Ridge Road property. The petition had been rejected. A signature notarization had been improperly executed, but it had been filed, it was on record, and the timestamp told me that my son had begun this process while I was still sitting in this house, while I was still eating breakfast at that farm table, while I was still sleeping in that bedroom. He had started dismantling my life before I even left. I sat in the parking lot for a long time. The sky was enormous, the kind of pale September blue that Carrie always said made Tennessee look like a painting. Then I called Brandy. She answered on the second ring. And before I spoke, before I said a single word, I heard it. Not guilt, not defensiveness, but something rawer. A woman at the end of a very long rope. A woman who had been waiting. Daddy! Her voice fractured on the word. Oh, Daddy, I am so glad you called. I need you to listen to me before you talk to Travis. Please, because it wasn't all 3 of us, and there are things you don't know, and I have been sick over this for 2 months. The oak tree in the backyard was visible through the kitchen window from where I had parked. 40 years old. Carrie's tree, its leaves beginning to turn at the edges. Tell me, I said. And what Brandy told me over the next 25 minutes did not simplify what had been done to me. It did not reduce the weight of the empty cedar chest, or the blank walls, or the missing table I had built with my own hands. But it cracked the story open in a way I hadn't expected. And what fell out was not just betrayal. It was something more tangled and more heartbreaking. Something that forced me to ask a harder question than how could they do this to me? It forced me to ask what I had failed to see and for how long and at what cost. Brandy talked for 25 minutes without me interrupting once. That is not my natural tendency. I am a man who was raised to engage, to respond, to meet a statement with a question or a counterpoint. My father believed that silence during a conversation was a form of laziness, and I absorbed that belief early and carried it a long time. But something in my daughter's voice that afternoon, the specific texture of her distress, the way she kept stopping to gather herself and then continuing anyway, the sense that she had rehearsed this and still couldn't get through it cleanly, told me that the most useful thing I could offer her was the space to finish. So I listened. The story she told me began not in July, when I boarded the plane, but 18 months earlier, in the winter before last. Travis had come to her with numbers. A spreadsheet, she said. She almost laughed when she mentioned it, a short, humorless sound, printed out and presented to her at a Cracker Barrel off the interstate in Murfreesboro, halfway between her house and his condo, like a business meeting. The spreadsheet detailed what Travis called the family's long-term financial exposure. My long-term care costs, projected over 10 to 15 years, assuming moderate cognitive decline and eventual assisted living. The carrying costs of the Clover Ridge Road property, taxes, insurance, maintenance, the estimated value of the estate versus the projected cost of preserving it. Travis's conclusion, presented with the confidence of a man who has already decided what the answer is before he asks the question, was that the family needed to begin restructuring assets before I became incapacitated and lost the legal capacity to consent. He kept saying, before Dad can't decide for himself anymore. Brandy told me. Like that was already decided, like you were already gone. I'm 73 years old. I drove myself to Phoenix. I sorted through 40 years of estate documents. I read contracts and negotiated with attorneys and cooked my own meals and drove on the interstate and remembered every name of every person I met. But in Travis's spreadsheet, I was already a liability, already a cost to be managed. Brandy had refused. She told him no clearly, she said, and she told him why, and she thought that was the end of it. She did not tell me because she didn't want to upset me, and because she believed she had stopped it, and because, and this is the part where her voice went very quiet, she did not fully want to believe that her brother was capable of what the spreadsheet implied. She was wrong on all 3 counts. What Travis did next, he did without her. He went to Cody. Cody didn't understand what he was agreeing to. Brandy said, "I want to be honest with you, Daddy, but I also need you to know that." Travis told him it was just storing some things, moving some furniture to cover a bill that had come due. He told Cody you knew about it. I absorbed that. Cody thought I knew. Travis told him you'd discussed it before you left, that it was your idea. I looked at the oak tree for a long time. "And the jewelry," I said. "Carrie's jewelry." Brandy made a sound I will not forget. It was not a word. It was the sound of someone who has been holding a specific piece of pain for 2 months and has finally been given permission to put it down. "That was Travis alone," she said. Cody didn't know about the jewelry. I didn't know until 2 weeks after, when I went to the house to check on things and the cedar chest was open. I called Travis and he said it was part of the liquidation, that the jewelry was an asset. Carrie's pearl necklace, her mother's pearls, the bracelet she wore every day for 15 years, an asset. I did not say anything for a moment. "Daddy, are you there?" "I'm here," I said. "I'm all right." I wasn't all right, but I meant it in the way it needed to be meant. I'm not going to collapse. I'm not going to disappear. I'm still standing in this parking lot, and I'm still the person I've always been, and that is not going to change because of a spreadsheet or an empty cedar chest or a son who looked at the life his father built and saw nothing but an asset to be liquidated. "I need a few days," I told Brandy. "Don't call Travis yet. Don't tell him I'm back." "Okay," she said, and then, "Daddy, I'm sorry I didn't stop it." "You tried," I said. "That matters." I meant that too. I spent 3 days alone in that house before I spoke to either of my sons. I want to be clear about what those 3 days were, because I think it would be easy to misunderstand them. They were not days of plotting. They were not days of accumulating grievances or rehearsing accusations or imagining confrontations. There was one evening, the first night, maybe 2 hours after my call with Brandy, when the anger came fully and I let it come, sitting in the dark kitchen at the farm table, feeling the full weight of what had been done, allowing myself to understand that this was not a misunderstanding or an error in judgment, but a deliberate choice made by my oldest son about what my life and my history were worth. I felt that. I did not run from it. But I also knew, sitting at that table, that a man of 73 who has lost as much as I have lost and kept as much as I have kept does not survive by feeding the fire. He survives by deciding, carefully and without self-deception, what he is going to do next and why. I called my attorney Gregory Alderman on the first morning. Gregory has handled my legal affairs for 22 years, and he is the kind of lawyer who tells you the truth before he tells you what you want to hear, which is the only kind worth having. I described what had been taken and how. He was quiet for a moment in the way that lawyers are quiet when they are organizing something serious. "Dennis, what they did, depending on the documentation and the authority they held, is potentially criminal, theft by deception at minimum, possibly elder financial abuse, which in Tennessee carries its own statutes." "I understand," I said. "Do you want to pursue it criminally?" I looked out the kitchen window, the oak tree, the stone patio with its lifted corner. Not yet, I said. I want to talk to my children first. Another pause. That's your right. I'd advise you to document everything before those conversations happen. Photographs, the documents in that envelope, the assessor's records, get it all in order. I spent the rest of the first day doing exactly that. I photographed every empty space, every bare wall, every open drawer. I made copies of every document in the manila envelope. I created a handwritten inventory of every missing item with estimated values, provenance, and significance. Not for the court, initially, but for myself. Because I had learned in 73 years that the most important step in dealing with a hard thing is making sure you can see it whole. Not the version that protects you from it, the actual thing in its full dimension. On the second day, Misty Greer knocked on my front door. I almost didn't answer. I was not in a state for neighbors, but something made me open the door, and there she was, a small woman in her late 60s, gray-haired, wearing a denim jacket and holding a casserole dish covered in foil with both hands, looking at me with the specific expression of someone who knows they have information you need and isn't sure how to give it to you. "I'm glad you're home, Dennis," she said. I invited her in. We sat at the farm table with the casserole between us, chicken and rice, the smell of it filling the emptied kitchen in a way that made my eyes sting unexpectedly, and she told me what she had seen. The truck had come on a Wednesday 2 days after I flew out. A large moving truck, white, no markings. Travis had been there, and a younger man Misty didn't know. Not Cody, she said carefully, someone else, which confirmed what Brandy had told me. And 2 men who appeared to be hired labor. They had worked for most of the day, loading furniture through the front door and the side door off the garage. Misty had watched from her front porch with increasing unease, and she had called my cell phone, which was on airplane mode over the Gulf of Mexico, and left a voicemail I would not hear for 2 months. Then a woman came, Misty said. I looked at her. In the afternoon, a younger woman, maybe mid-40s. She went inside and came out carrying a box, a cedar box. I sat very still. "Did you recognize her?" I asked. "No," Misty said, "but I took a picture." She showed me her phone. The woman in the photograph was Kristen Calloway, Travis's ex-wife, the woman Travis had divorced 6 years ago, the woman I had not seen or spoken to in half a decade. She was walking down my front porch steps carrying Carrie's cedar chest under one arm and a banker's box of papers under the other, and she was moving quickly, with the practiced efficiency of someone who knew exactly what she was there to do and how much time she had to do it. I stared at that photograph for a long time. Travis had not acted alone. Travis and Kristen, the ex-wife, the supposedly former relationship, had planned this together, which meant the divorce, or at least the distance it was supposed to represent, had been at least partially a performance, which meant there were layers to this I had not yet mapped. I thanked Misty. I ate 2 servings of the casserole because my body needed it and because it was the right thing to do. After she left, I sat with the photograph on my phone and I thought about my son. Not the version of him I had needed him to be, but the actual man, the one who had sat across from his sister at a Cracker Barrel with a spreadsheet, the one who had filed a property petition while I was still sleeping under his father's roof, the one who had called his ex-wife and said, "I need your help with something." And I tried to understand, not excuse, but understand what had built that man. Whether any of it was mine to own, that was the hardest thinking I did in those 3 days. On the 3rd day, I called Travis. He answered immediately, which told me he had been waiting. His voice was controlled, professional, the voice he used in real estate meetings. Warm on the surface, calibrated underneath. "Dad, hey, I was going to reach out this week. I'm at the house, Travis," I said. "Come on Saturday, bring Cody." A pause, just long enough to tell me he hadn't known I was back. Brandy had kept her word. "Sure," he said. "Of course, we can talk through everything." "Yes," I said, "we will." Saturday was 4 days away. I used the time to do something that surprised even me. I drove to the public library in town and spent 2 afternoons reading. Not case law, not financial statutes. I read about families, about the specific ways that grief fractures the people it doesn't kill, about the research on inheritance disputes, and what drives otherwise functional adults to do things that would have been unthinkable to them a decade earlier. I read about financial abuse of elders, not to arm myself with statistics, but because I needed to understand whether what had happened to me was aberrant or whether it was a version of something that happens in thousands of families and thousands of houses, while the person it's happening to is 30,000 feet in the air with their phone on airplane mode. It was not aberrant, it was disturbingly common. And that did not make it hurt less, but it made it legible in a way that helped me decide who I wanted to be in response to it. They came on Saturday morning. Travis arrived first, alone, in a car I didn't recognize. He was dressed carefully, pressed shirt, good shoes, which told me he had thought about how to present himself. He was 47 years old and looked it, the silver at his temples and the particular tightness around his eyes that men get when they have been carrying a decision they can't fully justify. He stood on my front porch and looked at me, and I could see him calculating, even then, even at that moment, reading the situation for advantage. I did not invite him in yet. I let him stand. "Dad," he said, "I know this looks bad." "It doesn't look like anything," I said. "It is what it is. We'll talk when your brother gets here." Cody arrived 20 minutes later. He parked crookedly at the curb the way he always has, and when he came up the front walk and saw me on the porch, he stopped walking. Just stopped, 10 feet away, and his face did something I had not seen since he was a child. It crumpled, not dramatically. But the careful adult composure gave way for just a moment, and underneath it was a 39-year-old man who looked like he'd been sick for 2 months. "Dad," he said, "I didn't know. I swear to you, I didn't know what he told me to do." "Come inside," I said, "both of you." We sat in the living room, in the remaining furniture, 3 mismatched chairs around a bare coffee table, and I laid the photographs on the table, the assessor's filing, the consignment receipt, the jewelry sale receipt, the photograph of Kristen walking down my porch steps with Carrie's cedar chest. Travis looked at the photograph for 3 seconds and then looked at me with an expression I will not easily forget, not shame, not remorse, but the look of a man who has been outflanked and is reorganizing. "Kristen has a stake in this," he said. "There were debts from the marriage." "Stop," I said. He stopped. "I'm going to speak and you're going to listen. When I'm finished, you can say whatever you need to say." I talked for 30 minutes. I did not raise my voice. I described every item that was missing, what it was worth financially, and what it was worth in every other way that money can't reach. I described my father's sideboard, the brass handles, the hand-cut dovetail joints, the specific smell of the wood after 60 years. I described the cherry dining table I built in the winter of 1987, the winter before Travis was born, the winter I was most afraid and most hopeful I had ever been as a young man. I described Carrie's pearl necklace, her mother's necklace, a piece of jewelry that was not mine to sell any more than her memory was mine to trade. I described what it felt like to walk into this house and find it emptied, not as an accusation, as a fact. Because I had decided that the most powerful thing I could do in that room was refuse to perform either rage or forgiveness before either one was earned. When I finished, Cody was crying. Not quietly. The kind of crying that a man does when he has been holding something too long and his body finally overrules his pride. Travis was very still. "I'm going to tell you what happens now," I said. "Gregory Alderman has a complete documentation of everything that was taken and its value. He has the assessor's records showing the property petition you filed. He has Misty Greer's photograph and her written account. What you did meets the definition of elder financial abuse under Tennessee statute, and I want you to understand that completely. Not as a threat, but as a fact you need to live with." Travis opened his mouth. "I'm not finished," I said. He closed it. "I am not going to file criminal charges." I let that sit for a moment. Not because what you did doesn't deserve consequences. It does. But because I have spent 73 years trying to be a man who responds to hard things with something more than punishment, and I am not going to stop being that man because of this. What I am going to require is full restitution. Every item returned if possible. Fair market value provided in writing for every item that cannot be returned, including your mother's jewelry, which you had no more right to touch than you had the right to dig up her grave. Cody made a sound. "There will be a legal agreement," I continued, "drawn up by Gregory, establishing a repayment structure and a clear delineation of my assets and my sole authority over them for the remainder of my life. You will both sign it. If either of you fails to honor it, I will pursue every legal remedy available to me. That is not a threat. It is a boundary. I should have drawn it more clearly a long time ago, and that is the part of this that I own. I looked at Travis. He was looking at the photograph of Kristen on the coffee table. Something in his face had finally shifted. Not all the way, not into the full accounting that would take much longer, maybe years, maybe never. But there was a crack in the calculation, and through it, I could see something that looked like the 18-year-old boy who used to sit in the kitchen doorway watching me work. "I need to know," I said quietly, "whether you are capable of understanding what you took from me. Not the furniture, not the truck. I need to know if you understand what was in that cedar chest and why it cannot be replaced." The silence lasted a long time. "I knew," Travis said. His voice was different, the calibration gone. "I knew what it was. I told myself it was just... I told myself you'd..." He stopped. "I knew," he said again. And this time it was just the two words, stripped of everything else. That was the most honest thing my oldest son had said to me in years, maybe longer, and I held it the way you hold something fragile, carefully, without squeezing, aware that the wrong pressure would break it. It took 11 months. The legal agreement was signed 6 weeks after that Saturday meeting, after considerable back and forth that Gregory handled with the patience of a man who has seen families do terrible things to each other and still believes in the possibility of resolution. Travis paid the majority of the restitution from the sale of investments, a process that cost him significantly, and I think was the first time in his adult life that the full financial consequence of a decision landed on him rather than on someone he had managed it onto. Cody, who had genuinely not understood the scope of what he'd participated in, paid a smaller portion and spent 3 months helping me repair and restore the garage workshop, which was the most useful form of accountability I could imagine for him. Carrie's jewelry was partially recovered. 2 pieces, the diamond earrings and a gold ring I hadn't even listed because I'd forgotten about it, were still in Kristen's possession and were returned through Gregory's office without a meeting I had to attend. The pearl necklace had been sold. Premier Estate buyers had moved it within 2 weeks of purchase, and the trail went cold after that. Gregory found the buyer, a woman in Memphis, but she was an innocent purchaser and had no legal obligation to return it. I did not pursue it further. I knew Carrie's necklace was gone in the way that some things go, not through catastrophe, but through the ordinary commerce of a world that doesn't know what something meant. I bought a cedar chest, plain, pine, not the same, not trying to be, and I put in it the things I still had. Her reading glasses, a birthday card she gave me in 2003 that I had inexplicably kept in the desk drawer, a photograph of the two of us at Reelfoot Lake in 1984, laughing at something neither of us could probably remember, young and certain in the way you are before life teaches you what certainty costs. I put the chest at the foot of the bed. That was enough. It had to be. Brandy came the weekend after the agreement was signed, and we replanted the corner of the stone patio where the oak tree's roots had lifted it. We worked most of a Saturday afternoon, she and I, her daughters Kayla and Alyssa running through the yard in the October light, and we didn't talk much. The kind of working silence between two people who have said what needed to be said and are now simply being present in a place that belongs to them both. At some point, Kayla, who is 12, came and stood beside me and looked at the oak tree with the seriousness that 12-year-olds can summon without warning. "Grandpa, how old is that tree?" 40 years, I said. "Your grandmother planted it." She looked at it for another moment. "It's really big." "It is," I said. Did she know it was going to get that big? I thought about that. About Carrie in 1984, 31 years old, in the backyard with a sapling and a shovel, choosing this particular spot for reasons I had never thought to ask her. "I don't think she was thinking about that," I said. "I think she was just planting something." Kayla nodded as though that made sense to her, and then she ran back across the yard to her sister. And I stood there with a trowel in my hand in the October light looking at a 40-year-old tree that had survived everything this yard had been through. And I understood, not for the first time but more completely than before, that this is the only real answer to loss, and not recovery, not restitution, not even justice, though all of those matter. You plant something, you tend it, you stay. My name is Dennis Calloway. I am 73 years old. I live on Clover Ridge Road in western Tennessee, in a house I built with my hands and have filled again, slowly, with what matters. The walls have photographs again. The dining room has a new table. Not cherry, not mine, bought from an estate sale in Covington, solid oak, older than I am, with marks on it from someone else's history. I eat at it every morning. I am learning to love it. Travis and I speak once a month. The conversations are careful and not yet warm, but they are honest in a way they were not before. And I believe, not blindly, not easily, but genuinely, that honesty, maintained long enough, has a chance of becoming something better. Cody comes by on Sundays sometimes. He is learning to work wood. His dovetails are still rough, but they're getting closer. I still sit in the rocking chair on the front porch in the late afternoon when the light comes through the oaks at that particular angle and turns everything amber and slow. I still drink something cold and let the silence of the place settle over me. The silence is different now, fuller somehow, or maybe I am more able to hear what it contains. I don't know how many years I have left. No man does. But I know what I want to do with them. I want to keep being someone worth knowing. I want to keep building things that last. I want to be a grandfather who shows those girls what it looks like when a man is wronged and chooses, carefully and without illusion, the harder and more human path. Carrie would have understood that. She always understood the things that took me a long time to reach. The oak tree is still growing. That, in the end, is the whole story.